Hey, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and we're doing something a little different this month. Usually this would be our shelf life episode looking at which games stayed in my collection, but since we're halfway through 2021 and I've already covered a bunch of really cool games, like 50 of them or something, way too many, I wanted to take a little bit of time to look back at what I've covered and which things are sticking at the top of my list, at least so far in the year. So I'm going to go through my top 5 games published in 2021 and my top 5 Kickstarter games that I've covered in 2021, alternating between the two from my number 5 to my number 1. And if you hang on until the end, you can see our contest results and who wins a free game from my collection by guessing the most correct answers. So let's jump in and find out what the cream of the crop is so far in 2021. So for number 5 on the Kickstarter side of things, I picked Union City Alliance. This is a solo and cooperative superhero-themed deck builder where you go around the city trying to overcome crimes and defeat some main villain. And although I only got to play this one on TTS, so I haven't seen a physical prototype yet, and I only got to play a limited amount of content, I think the deck building here is really fun. You've got a deck that is specific to your character and also a more generic deck, but you have to move to locations in the city to build from there. So the deck building has more going on than you might expect on average. And also the variety in city locations, in villains and events you combat, and the, I think, variety in the scenarios you can play. Again, I've only played one of them, but it seems like they have the right stuff in mind. Should make this a really fun deck building experience for people who are into the superhero genre. On to the release games side of things, my number 5 is Company of Heroes. This is a solo and competitive and cooperative war game that I covered recently, and it's a more streamlined war game than a lot of the ones I cover from GMT and Dan Verson Games and that kind of thing. It's pretty straightforward, and it is gigantic with huge miniatures, a huge board, almost bigger than they need to be. But what really won me over here are the core combat mechanics. I love the you go, I go movement where you use little dice to track everything, how you can upgrade your units, the different factions you can play with. Solo is not necessarily the best mode to play the game on, but it works really well. The AI is quick to implement and easy to fight against, but then competitive is really cool too. So if you're into war games, especially streamlined ones, and you think you might play this competitive and or solo, definitely worth checking out Company of Heroes. Back to Kickstarters, my number 4 is So You've Been Eaten. And this one is a really fun, straightforward little game. You've got 2 sides you can play as. So you can play 1v1 competitive, but I focused on the solo modes. You can play as either the alien trying to get this miner out of you, or this miner trying to get these crystals, and both modes work really well. It can feel more random or deterministic, whichever side you kind of gravitate towards. The art is fun, the theme is ridiculous. You have like some dice placement and action selection, card management, just a really fun, solid experience for a very low price point, especially with the fact that you get so many different ways to play the game. As for my number 4 for release games, I'm going to do one that's a little unusual for me. You all might know that I tend to not love Euros, especially Euros with a solo mode, which can feel tacked on, but Merchant's Cove defied a lot of those expectations for me. It's a really nice marketing game. I love the way the market works, how you manipulate it, pull these adventurers from the bag to try to make your goods worth the most. And the thing that really made this one rise above the pack of Euros for me personally is that I love investigating and playing around with different factions, and even in the base game, you've got 4 completely different characters that have very different like little strategies and mechanisms to try out. With the expansions, those options increase even further, and there's tons of little modular elements to drop in. Now, again, this is one that's going to get its best value if you also might play it competitive, but here the solo is really good on its own, especially if you get the secret stash, which drastically increases your options of a play. So Merchant's Cove, really good for a Euro and just in general. As for my number 3 Kickstarter, going to give this one to a game that's been a favorite of mine for a long time, Sentinels of the Multiverse. Now, the funny thing is I say favorite, but I sold my copy of Sentinels and wasn't playing it for a while because I was playing the app a lot and I wasn't sure if I needed to have a physical copy of the game, especially for solo play, which requires you to control multiple characters. But Sentinels is amazing for cooperative play, and man, my son really enjoys it. My game groups really have fun with it. Such amazing variety in the heroes you can try out, the villains you can go against, and the key thing is this new revised edition, which is what is my number 3. This is an old game, but the revised edition went on Kickstarter in 2021. This is such a great new take on the game. Every deck that I felt had some problems, had cards that were overpowered, were boring to play because there were no choices, they've made them more interesting, more choice-driven, giving you more variety in the play. So I'm super excited to dig into more than what I saw in the TTS demo. I think this will push Sentinels even further in my good graces. I have already sold all my physical stuff of the original set, and I kind of expect to spend a bunch of that money all over again with the new new releases of the expansion. So Sentinels is my number 3. But on the retail release one, my number 3 might be a bit of a divisive one, and that is Sleeping Gods. I know for a lot of people this is probably their number 1. This is this big, expansive exploration game, and I definitely was enthralled with it. Man, I could not stop playing this, especially my first campaign through. Could not put it down. It is just so much fun to explore around this vast map, find these like cultures and little stories and little mysteries to solve. Lots of really cool things in terms of emergent storytelling and narrative and world building. And that's why it's my number 3 on this list, because I was so invested in it and spent so much time playing it and could not get enough. But that being said, it is going to be a miss for a lot of people. Lots of narrative reading. It does not have a good cohesive main storyline. Instead, it's all about side quests. It's basically side quests the game, which might not be appealing to a lot of gamers. And managing all of your characters and all of the items you build up can really be a chore eventually. So just be aware of that before you look into this one. But if you like narrative experiences, Sleeping Gods can be amazing. And you can be like me. I already gave mine away to somebody else, so play through as much as you want and then pass it on to somebody. It's the kind of game that can be enjoyed by a lot of people even once the replay is kind of worn out for you. All right, now we get to my number 2 Kickstarter, and this was the toughest choice of the entire list for me. Which Kickstarter should be number 2 and number 1? And I eventually, after a lot of hemming and hawing, decided Hoplomachus Victorum would be my number 2. I think this is a great new look at Hoplomachus. It's a focused solo campaign, and that's the main way I played Hoplo anyway. It still has the fun tactical combat of Hoplomachus, moving around, using your different units, bringing them in strategic places, and it adds in a lot of the kind of scenario-based and terrain-based stuff from the original Origins set of Hoplomachus. But the way your character grows, the variety in the squads and the enemies you face, the more streamlined AI, and the entire kind of campaign structure leading you to these big boss battles, I think this one is awesome. I played it a bunch on TTS. I got Peter playing it too, and I fully expect to play it even more once the physical copies are available. Really excited about this one. And on the retail release side, number 2 is Bloodborne. I know some of you are surprised, except maybe Howard from our Discord. Bloodborne was, for me, a really, really good kind of dungeon crawly adventure combat game. Now, I'll freely admit, I said this in my review, I am a huge fan of the Bloodborne video game. I've played through it multiple times. I like the Souls series and From Software's work in general. And Bloodborne, the board game, is one of the best adaptations of a video game I've seen. It captures the setting, it captures the narrative, it captures a lot of the feel of the game. So for me personally, that's a big element in its success and in my enjoyment of it. And I fully recognize that the game won't work for a lot of people. Combat can be too harsh, too win or lose. The campaign structure can be a little iffy, especially if you play by the official rules where one death means you restart the whole thing. Ha ha ha, don't do that, that's ridiculous. But the tension of combat, the quick play, the quick setup, the variety in monsters, the branching narrative of the storyline and the quests, all of it was a big win for me. Really enjoyed this one. And now we get to my number 1 Kickstarter, and I bet a lot of you already know what it is because I haven't mentioned it yet, and that is Primal. Oh my gosh, Primal is amazing. I've become a fan, it's a very popular genre recently, of these boss battler games, where it strips away some of the, at least for me, bloat I feel in dungeon crawlers, where things get kind of repetitive or redundant. Primal strips away even more than most boss battlers. You don't even have a full map. You don't have to count out hexes or spaces of movement. Instead, you're just moving around these 4 spaces of the monster and reacting to them and them reacting to you. They don't even get a turn. They just kind of do crazy things as you take your actions and the builds of the different monsters. Now, I do have to say I saw a very limited subset of the content in this game. I don't really know how good crafting will be. I've only played against 2 of the different bosses. I've only played with some of the basic builds of the heroes, but the possibilities here seem amazing. I love the tactical choices, the hand management, how tense these battles can be against these ridiculously powerful creatures. Definitely gives me those Monster Hunter vibes, even though I know the Monster Hunter board game should maybe do that. Primal was where it was at for me. Definitely the Kickstarter I'm most excited about from this year so far. And to finish things up on the retail side, anyone on our Discord knows exactly which game this is going to be. It's been my favorite one of the year. That is Bullet with a heart after it from Level 99 Games. And I gotta say, this is not even close. Like, Bloodborne was maybe like an 8 out of 10 for me. I don't know. And then Bullet, you jump straight to like a 9.5 or a perfect 10 out of 10. This game is amazing. And that's even without the competitive play. The competitive play is awesome, but just playing the boss mode with a solo or co-op and varying up these different bosses, which have such challenging little puzzles puzzles to confront, and playing with the different characters with their special abilities, and just the great spatial puzzle of moving these bullets around on the board. I adore this game, one of my top games of recent memory easily, and definitely without a doubt my top game of 2021 so far. So there we go, 10 great games, and I imagine some of them might have been surprises for you, and feel free to let me know in the comments what are your favorite games released this year or on Kickstarter or GameFound this year. We can talk about them. If you like, hang on to see the contest results and who wins a free game, and otherwise I'll see you next month when we get back to our regularly scheduled Shelf Life episode. All right, let's get to contest time, but first just looking at a few data points for those who are interested. We had about 100 people who guessed for this one, and first I looked at the incorrect answers that got the most votes. So just about half of you thought I would put Adventure Tactics in the top 5, and if this were Peter's list from the podcast and the streaming channel, I'm sure he would have. It's one of his top ones of the year, but wasn't that high for me. Also, a whole bunch of you, again about half, voted for Terraforming Mars Ares Project, which is just coming into retail now, but again, just okay for me. I'm not a huge fan of yours, although that is a good one. And then Solomon Kane and Oath both also got a lot of votes. Solomon Kane I do enjoy very much, although it is a bit of a bear to play through. And Oath I don't really like the solo mode. I think multiplayer is pretty cool, but solo not really doing it for me. And for other little tidbits, I found the games that received the fewest votes, but were on my top 10 list. Union City Alliance, definitely the winner here. Only 22 people voted for that one in the Kickstarter category. Bloodborne, even though it was my number 2, only 30 people picked. Definitely surprised people with that one. And then coming in at a similar level, Merchant's Cove and Company of Heroes. So my Kickstarter ones were much easier for people to guess. As you can tell from here, a lot of those got a ton of votes. My non-Kickstarter retail releases surprised people more. And finally, getting to the winner of this month's contest, and no need for a die roll or anything complicated this time, Jorgen Bjorkslaten, I hope I got that kind of right, had 9 out of 10. Nobody got a perfect score this time, but Jorgen was the closest of anyone. But I do want to give a shout out to our 2 runner-ups, the only 2 people with 8 out of 10s, Raphael Pabon and Carl Rahenkamp, Purple Moose, if you watch his YouTube channel. I think Carl was a runner-up for last month's contest as well. So Carl, you're almost there, buddy. Keep going. Raphael and Carl both got 8 out of 10. Great job, but Jorgen, you are the winner for this month. I'll be emailing you soon. And to everyone, thanks for watching this little top list. We'll have a real top of 21 list at the end of the year like normal, but I thought this would be kind of fun, and we will get back to Shelf Life in just a month. So thanks everybody, and see you next time.